Adam Marburger remembers distinctly when his high school guidance teacher told his 18-year-old self that you are a loser and you'll never amount to anything, even though he was working hard and making his own money. But the guidance counselor's words struck a chord and lit a fire under him. But now, after building 6 massively successful companies and operating them simultaneously, he's figured out the real difference between authentic success, either personally and professionally, and what we tell ourselves. In today's episode, Adam talks about his new book, You Are the Problem, A Guide to Getting Out of Your Own Way. Welcome to Lifeology.
I am happy to be here, James. Thanks for inviting me, and I'm excited.
I am looking forward to this as well. When I was reading your backstory, you and I actually have a lot of similarities, so it's going to be great to talk about it. So I'm sure a lot of people listening right now have been told simple things like that, or many things like that, and haven't been able to get out of their own way. For you, when you were 18 years old, like I said, you were making your own money, but thought you were doing pretty well when your guidance counselor told you that. What was the difference between what she thought about you and what you thought about yourself?
I remember that day very vividly. The thing is, I looked up to this individual, and those words when she called me a loser, which looking back, I kind of was. I was rolling with the wrong crew. And so there's two sides of this coin. Number one, she was just a mean person. Or number two, she saw something in me and felt like saying something to me because it would light a fire. So, looking back, being that 18-year-old boy and hearing those piercing words, like I shed a tear over it. And I said, I lit a fire in my belly. I said, I'm going to show this individual. I'm going to be ridiculously successful in spite of this individual. So, yeah, it was an interesting day in my life, very monumental.
Yes, I'm sure retrospectively, in other words, looking back on that, you can perhaps see it differently. Like you said, there are two sides of that coin, but like in the moment though, you heard it differently. At that time, at 18 years old, how did you measure success, or what was success to you?
Then success might have been my social status. Who am I running with? How much money's in my pocket? Back then, that's what success was to me. It's very different from what that means today, but that's what it was back then.
And that makes sense at that time because that was what your interests were. It's whomever we associate with is going to determine pretty much our success, what it means to us. And so if our friend group, which of course there's nothing wrong with them, but if their friend group is kind of limited as far as what they think success is, we're gonna merge with that. So in psychology, we have what's called the law of the group. You become the sum of the parts of the people with whom you associate. So for example, if someone's like a level 10 of what they think success is, and someone's level 5, well, that person who's level 5 is going to level up to a 7.5, and the person who's really successful at a 10 is going to decrease down to that 7.5. So it's really important to understand that people with whom we associate determine, or can influence rather, our success.
Amen to that. Amen.
So later on, you create the 6 massively successful companies. What was the steps for you that you said, I'm going to use the words that my guidance counselor told me, and I'm going to use that to catapult me moving forward? How did you maintain that remembrance or that memory to help you?
So I've always been kind of a worker. I love to work. And hearing those words made me literally go into kind of grind mode. So from age 18 to 23, it was about working, 100 hours a week, saving as much money as I possibly can, building wealth, buying assets, getting into real. So it was grind. That's what happened. And then, then I started kind of slowing down a little bit as I started having kids, and I started thinking about legacy, passive income. Not working so hard, working smart. So back then it fueled me to just work like a psychopath, really is what it was. I mean, I had one speed and it was 100 miles an hour every single day of the week. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed working, I still do enjoy it.
Yeah. So at the time when you were 18 to 23, like you said, you were, your focus was really on making that money. So your level of success then started to change or started to morph into something different. Sometimes when we become successful, or when we are successful, sometimes that concept of success kind of pigeonholes us into one area. And so as we get talking more in this conversation, I want to see how your version of success became more expansive. And so we can look at all different ways in which people can do that as well, instead of getting too focused on one thing. When I say too focused, doesn't mean it's a negative thing. It just means, and we're going to be very successful there, but we want to make sure that other areas of our life continue to grow as well. What was it for you in your book, You Are the Problem, A Guide to Getting Out of Your Own Way? What happened in your life that says, you know what, it is time for me to write this book?
Yeah, well, that's a really great question. And I'll tell you really what happened was life threw a lot of curveballs. So I had a very successful career in the retail automotive industry with a very large salary, and I wasn't fulfilled. So I went from making all the money one day to no money the next day because I decided to jump off the deepest end and the biggest ocean possible. And so I finally, for 2 years, I went without any income. A lot of my assets were gone. I sold some real estate. So I got into 2019 early. My business is now formed. we're doing okay. But then in February,
Mhm.
my stepfather, who was like a father to me, he had a stroke on Friday and passed away on Sunday. And then April 1st, my business partner and my best friend, he took his own life. The gentleman that I built
Oh
my
my goodness.
largest company with, Singular Services. So he passes on
Mhm.
April Fool's Day, right? And then the next month, my grandfather, who's the patriarch of the family, passes away. And then the
Mhm.
following month,
Oh goodness.
my wife and I at the time, after 13 years of marriage, split. So I went through boom, 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 tragic, tragic, tragic.
Mhm.
So now
Mhm.
I'm living in a spare bedroom with my mother while she's grieving and I'm grieving,
Mhm. Mhm.
and I
Mhm.
self-destructed. I spent probably
Mhm.
90 days of just ignorance. And then
Mhm.
one day I was looking in the mirror. It was in August 2019. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I looked at myself in the
Mhm.
mirror. And the reason I titled my book the way I did, and I'm not going to use the words, but I titled my
Mhm.
book because it was the conversation I had with myself.
Mhm.
I was in the
Mhm.
moment more self-aware than I've ever been in my life. And so I started making decisions. And what you just said about the sum, you're the sum of who you hang out with. Well, that's what I
Mhm.
did immediately was I started cutting people out of my life that didn't bring value, that didn't bring positivity.
Mhm.
And then my
Mhm.
life changed forever. And I wrote a book about my journey to help other people that get in their own way. It's about the stopping the self-sabotage. It's stopping the victim mindset. It's understanding that we can have it all, but you have to take the necessary actions. So anyway, that's the long-winded answer of why I wrote the book. I wrote the book because I had
Mhm.
to help people.
Mhm. Mhm. Yes. Well, not only to help people, but to help yourself as well. First of all, I want to thank you for sharing that grief. For all of us, grief is very near. So I appreciate you sharing that on here with all my listeners as well. During that time, when you were very successful and had all these different companies, like you said, and then often we take that success, and then when something happens, we forget the lessons we learned initially. So when that person told you this, when you're 18-year-old, that you're never going to amount to anything, you took that and you use it for, your 10 years, or I'm assuming 10 years, 10, 15 years. And from there, all of a sudden you were successful. And then when things happened, things fell apart for you. Sometimes we take that success and we forget that what we learned before, that can still be applied today. And so when people are very successful and things happen, we forget that. And so how are you able to take the aspects of the lessons you learned, implement that in your book, A Guide to Getting Out of Your Own Way? How did you make sure that you could take the initial lessons and also move that forward or implement that in your current life?
Well, I made sure, first of all, the main lesson that I took. So my counselor made me feel a certain way. So then
Okay.
by proxy, I started, we can use the term relentless. I had a relentless tenacity
Okay.
when it comes to work ethic. And so
Mm-hmm.
I've taken that work ethic as the foundation of every one of my companies. It's about doing what others are not willing to do. So that is a
Okay.
huge
Makes sense.
piece to how we operate today. We all possess a 10x type attitude, whatever it takes, no
Mm-hmm.
excuses. We hold
Mm-hmm.
ourselves accountable. We are responsible for everything good and bad. So it has played a major
Great.
role in how I operate today, from going back as a little boy, and that
Mm-hmm.
foundation of just insane work ethic is why we're all successful. Our teams are very successful because of that.
Wow, I really appreciate that. It's very easy for us to set external boundaries with people. So if I see someone bullying somebody, of course, you and I would go over there. We would protect that person. Unfortunately, when
Yeah.
it comes to internal boundaries, we often don't set those internal boundaries. So my self-talk, whatever I'd say to myself, sometimes if it's not filtered or I'm not aware of it, that self-talk can influence me. And so sometimes we don't realize that even though we protect the people around us, the things we say to ourselves are very cruel, are very bully-like. And so it's important
Yeah.
to be able to set those internal boundaries for ourselves. And so what I'm hearing from you is you did set those internal boundaries. So when things happened and you held yourself accountable to a certain standard that you probably hold other people accountable to as well. Is that correct?
Amen. Amen to that. And you talk about self talk. We should never say anything negative. First of all, we should never say anything negative about others, but we should definitely never say anything negative about ourselves. Words matter. We are worthy. We are worth it. We have purpose. I see so many people just beating themselves down. We got to have positive self affirmations. It's a daily
Yeah.
exercise too. It's a daily exercise we should practice. We are worthy. We are capable. We are loved.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can go out and
Yes.
inspire, motivate other people. It's what we say to ourselves matters. I take that serious
Yes.
too. I really do, because I used to be that individual that, I believed I was a loser. There was a time I believed I was a loser.
Mm-hmm.
I was in some toxic
Yeah.
relationships and I had some situations in my life. I believed I wasn't worthy. And then finally, I was able to make decisions and stop being around certain people. And then my life just freaking blew up, you know?
Yeah. That's amazing. It really is. When we're kids, we're often taught things. And so we can have the best childhood or even the quote worst childhood. But when that happens, we internalize situations in life and we determine what the lesson is. And so for some people, they, like I said, they have a great childhood, but something happens and they internalize themselves that they are a loser, there's something wrong with them, or they're stupid, or they're ugly, or fat, whatever it might be. And then what we don't realize is that template, that childhood template, in other words, the foundation of how we grow, those words, or that phrase or that concept will be part of every decision we make. And so it's important to really be mindful of that. The way that people can really determine what their core belief is when they do something that they're embarrassed about, that they feel that they did really poorly at. What is a phrase that they hear in their head? You're stupid. You always do this wrong. You're so ugly. Whatever that term is, that is a core belief that we learned as a child. And so it's important to be aware of what that specific term is, because if it's something good, like I didn't do very well, but I'm really proud of myself, then that's the core belief you have about yourself. But the majority of us have a core belief that is not so healthy. So the way to really understand it as an adult is to listen to what that phrase is when you do something that you're not proud of. And so you can counteract that by saying, wait a minute, what's the evidence that proves that I'm ugly? What's the evidence that proves that I'm a loser? And so if there's no evidence, that's how you change the core belief, because you disprove it. And so sometimes, not sometimes, as kids, we believe certain things, but if we don't challenge that as an adult, well, then we're going to believe something based on a childhood understanding of the world, but not as an adult version of it. So it's why it's so important to counteract that negativity by saying, what is the evidence that proves this core belief? And more than likely, there is no evidence with that. Tell me more about your book. You Are the Problem, A Guide to Getting Out of Your Way. So this is your own story, but it sounds like you have a slightly different way of how you help people set boundaries, because yours is more direct, more succinct when you talk to yourself. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I mean, here in the book, first of all, there's certain pillars to a fulfilled life. I believe you got to have your faith. I think we should all have some form of faith. I'm not going to get ultra religious here, but we got to have faith. We got to invest in our family. Family's everything, right? Because when we are on our deathbed, we're going to have a handful, maybe a dozen people that are really there, and those are the family, right? The glorified acquaintances probably aren't going to be there. Our friends, our circle, like our top five, we should pay attention and audit our top five. We have to invest in our top five. And then we've got our fitness, health is wealth, right? Then we got our finances. Then we have our personal development, and then we have our vocation. We have these 7 buckets. They constantly have to be filled. We can't just neglect a bucket, right? And so I wrote this book with certain intent to talk about each one of these buckets: our spiritual life, our physical life, understanding our past. There's a chapter that I really dug in deep into, is we are not our past and we're not our parents. Like, understanding that our past got us to where we are now, it doesn't really have bearing on where we can go with the right mindset, with the right circle of influence. We can have it all, right? So I challenge people to forgive themselves for all the bad stuff that you did, because we hold that resentment. I held it for so long, and I wasn't allowed to get to the good stuff because I carried it around. I forgave myself. And then after you forgive yourself, you can forgive others much easier, right? So forgiveness is a huge piece to that. And committing to personal mastery is understanding that we're our own masterpiece. God hardwired us for greatness, right? We have our own journey on this planet. Stop paying attention to everybody else. Now I say study the greats. If you want great things, study the greats. Study them, study patterns and habits, those things, right? But let's not pay too much attention to everybody else. Focus on ourselves a little bit more. Personal mastery is you're never going to arrive at the destination. I challenge people to understand that. Like, we're a work in progress, right? Every day's a new day, right? So this book has a lot of little gems to make people feel good about themselves, to help people get to that next level. That's what it's really all about,
I really like how you break those pillars down, what we'll call them, pillars or buckets, same thing.
Yeah.
It's oftentimes when people take a life experience and that becomes a label for who they are. If they're a bankrupt person, a divorced person, or a loser, whatever it might be, they take an event and then they put a label to it, and then the label becomes who they are. And we forget that a situation is just a situation. Life continues to move forward, whether we believe it or not. But if our mindset gets stuck in that, like you said, then all of a sudden we become what that is. My listeners of yours have heard me say this 1,000 times. I like to think of every event in our life like a jigsaw puzzle piece. We've all put a jigsaw puzzle together. So in every situation, that's a jigsaw puzzle piece. And so sometimes if we take that jigsaw puzzle piece and we look at it for too long, all of a sudden then that becomes, that's all we see. But if we take a little bit of time, and there's a legacy that comes from that, and I'll talk about that in a second. But that jigsaw puzzle piece, if we look at it for too long, it's like, well, where does this go? It doesn't make any sense. So when we hold on to it, we don't see anything. But when a little bit of perspective, and that's, when we look back on something, we realize, okay, this makes sense. And so we'll realize how one thing linked together. So pretty soon that one jigsaw puzzle piece has like 7 jigsaw puzzle pieces, and you start to see what that pattern looks like. And so that's why it's important to say when a situation happens, if we become that label, then we will only be that jigsaw puzzle piece. So we want to make sure that we understand that one thing is just an event in our life. And so as things come together, we can retrospectively, in other words, look back later on and say, I didn't like that. I would never go through it again, but I saw how one thing led to another. And when it leads to another, that becomes who we are today. And if you like who you are today, the situations that were in our past we would never want to go through again, well, all those added up to become who we are today. So if you like who you are today, then those pieces had played a role in that, and you got to choose what that role meant for you as regards to who you are today.
That was well said too. And I think, I'm 44. Hearing what you just said makes sense to me at 44. I don't know if it would have at 24. You know what I'm saying? Because you don't respect the good and the bad until you're a little older, and you can appreciate that the stars aligned the way they were supposed to, and it got us to where we are, right? And so, I appreciate what you just said. It makes all the sense in the world.
One thing thank you first off. One of the things you really said that really struck a chord with me, and I think it's really important that my listeners hear this as well. As you said, as far as the legacy you want to create for your family moving forward, so many times people are like, I'm just trying to get through the day. What was the mindset, or how were you able to say, okay, I'm beyond the paycheck to paycheck. I'm building wealth. Wealth can be defined in any way, from joy, from peace, from prosperity, however you want to quantify it. But how were you able to say, I'm building this, but I also want to create a legacy for my family? How did you create that add-on part of it?
Well, I worked as a W-2 employee for a very long time. As a W-2 employee, I also had other businesses, but those businesses were real estate, martial arts. They were kind of passive. I wasn't kind of in the day-to-day. I was sick and tired of clocking in and clocking out for somebody else's dream. I was building somebody else's dream. And really what happened was this. It was a Tuesday night, and I got home from work. I was supposed to be home at 6 to take my daughter to the park. I got home at 8 because I was there 2 hours late after close, and I didn't get to take my daughter to the park. And she said she was laying in her top bunk, arms crossed, mad. She then compares me to the neighbor's dad. She goes, Ty and me as dad, he's always home, and he gets to go to the park every day. And I start instead of listening, I started defending myself in my position. Well, I'm not a school teacher. I don't get home at 3. And then I'm like, whoa. And so I immediately went out to the garage and I called my boss. I said, now's the time. It's the beginning of the end. So that was the number one. The piece of it was family. I needed to be more available to my babies. That was the first and most important thing. So then a couple weeks later, I put in my resignation. I was there for another month, and then I jumped off to a destination unknown, started my own thing, but I was home. So to me, legacies of family is being, so here's success. Let me define this. So we'll close the loop on this. Here's what success is. It's doing what you want, whenever you want, with whoever you want. It doesn't have dollars to it. It doesn't have anything. There's no status to it. It's I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to do it whenever I want. I'm going to do it with whoever I want. That's success. So legacy to me is that, leading into that. So I'm there now, meaning I don't take meetings I don't want to be in. I don't take clients that I don't want to work with. It's just what it is. I'm living in purpose, and it took a long time to get here. And guess what? I'm humble enough to know I've lost it all before, and I could lose it all again. So I live every day with a smile, with humility, with purpose, with intent, and the fear of God, to be honest. I know I could lose everything. So I'm in a different place. So
yes. And I like the fact that even though you could lose everything, but there's a piece about that. And so in psychology, we have another term. It's a fancy term that's called a dialectic. And I don't expect people to remember that, but a dialectic means there are two opposing things that can exist at the same time. You have the fear of God, and you also know that you can lose things, but you have peace. So all those are very different, but they're all true. And they all exist at the same time. So it's important to realize that when we're like, I'm mad at you, but I love you, and all that's true. So the complexity of our emotions are so great that we don't have to choose one or the other. Going back to the whole aspect of a legacy, people don't realize that in every moment, there is a legacy that's grown out of it. Unfortunately, when a woman who lost her daughter, she created MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. So that's a huge foundation that helps individuals, and it came out of grief. So once again, there's a legacy that comes out of something. So there may not be something as profound as Mothers Against Drunk Driving for people, but a legacy can come out of, what did I learn? What was a lesson? If it's a lesson, I will never love again, or I hate everybody, or I will never be successful. That is a legacy, another core belief that we create out of an event. And so the legacy that's created then becomes that foundation for how we move forward in our life. And so sometimes we don't realize the legacy was created by a traumatic event when we were younger, or even now. So the important thing is to say, what am I learning about myself? What did I learn? And is that still relevant? Once again, what's the proof that proves this or disproves that? So even though the core beliefs we had as children are relevant, but we also have those every moment. So you can hang out with a friend, and what's a legacy that was created in that dynamic, in that conversation. So recognizing that we always crystallize something, or in other words, we take something and we make it become our truth, and we add all this truth together to become who we are today. So just know that in every event, there is a legacy that's created, from the most traumatic thing to the most fun thing, but it's our due diligence and our self-responsibility to be mindful of what that legacy is, to internalize that, to move us forward in the direction we want our lives to go.
Amen. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I was, like I said earlier, at the very beginning of this, I didn't find out. So in my graduate school, I was kind of an outlier. I was a good student, but I just didn't kind of fit the demographic, and so of that school. And so I found out a couple years later from one of my guidance counselors. She was like a grandmother to me, one of my professors. She told me, she's like, James, yeah, the professors there didn't think you'd be very good as a clinician. They didn't think you had what it takes. And I heard that, and I was like, are you serious? And I laughed at that, and I didn't take it in a negative way. I just thought it was hysterical. And so 20, 25, 26 years later, I think I've done pretty well. But I remember, but those moments, and I've had other people who were against lifeology as I created this. They're like, James, you have nothing to say. Who's going to listen to you? And I've done pretty well from that as well. But what I do, and I'm sure you do this as well, is I take those negative comments, what was perceived as negative, and I actually use them just like it was fuel. Because I remember in one of my books at the beginning of it, I wrote, I thank you for all those naysayers. I really appreciate that you've got me to where I am today. But it's true, because the negativity, the quote negativity, it is the resilience that we have when we hear that. It really shows who we are, and that allows us to become the successful people. So sometimes I'm more grateful, and I say this respectfully, people can't see me in quotations. I'm grateful for those people who are the naysayers, because they've allowed me to become the person I am today.
Yeah, amen to that. Haters, I embrace it. I wrote a chapter actually in the book. It's called "Embrace the Hate." They mean here, you got to have it. I mean, the more you climb, the more you do, the more people are going to try to, take you down a notch. And it's a lot of people get caught up in where they're first experiencing haters for the first time, and it really messes with them. And I when I mentor individuals, I'm like, no, listen, it's part of the process. Like, that's a good thing, because if you don't have any haters, you're not doing enough. And just even yesterday, me and my girlfriend were having a conversation about a couple people that are just really hating on me, and one blew my mind. One is like, I thought this person was my friend, but to come to find out, they're not. They're like, it's a friend in disguise is what I call it. They're just waiting on the sidelines. They're on my Facebook feed. They're there. They're watching, but they're just waiting for me to fall down so they can clap. And but it's part of the process. I was a little, not upset. I was a little shocked yesterday, but in about 5 minutes, I let it go. It's like, whatever, gotta have it. It's important.
Yes.
Let
me say this really fast, and then we'll close out. So there was a research study that was done. So out of 100 people, it was found that there are 4 categories of people in our life. And so the 4 categories are this, and I'll say them really quickly. The 4th category, the bottom category, are those people who don't like us. They'll never like us. Doesn't matter what we say. They're just not going to be for us. The 3rd category are those people who don't like us, but could be talked into liking us. The 2nd category, it sounds like your friend here, are those individuals who we thought did like us, but all of a sudden they something happened and they dislike us. And so they're kind of like that frenemy type of person. And the top category, kind of like your top 5 that you were talking about, are those people who will love you and will support you in everything you do. So the really important factor is when we recognize where people are and we allow them to filter down into those categories based on their actions. From there, we decide how much energy do I give these people. So the top group, we're going to give 100% energy to them. The other ones, you want to recognize that I don't have to give the same amount of energy to those people, because they're never going to be for me. So why would I invest my time and energy into someone or something who's never going to appreciate me? So it's important to really recognize that if we give all our energy to every single person in our life, unfortunately, that's just, I don't say a waste of time. It's just there's no return on our investment. And we're going to continue to try and prove ourselves to be what those people want, as opposed to the people we're supposed to be like. So it's really good for us to remember that, because it kind of, it just liberates many people to realize, gosh, I don't have to be nice. I don't have to have everyone in my life, because not everybody in our life can go where we're going to go as well. So Adam Marburger, I'm speaking very quickly as I know we're wrapping up here, but I want to ask you the question, where can my viewers and listeners find out more information about you and to purchase your book, You Are the Problem, A Guide to Getting Out of Your Own Way?
Best way to find me and connect with me, you can go to adammarburger.com. The site's under construction as we speak, because it's going to be really amazing. In a few weeks, we're redoing everything, but adammarburger.com. Find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. Adam Marburger, Marburger. Facebook, I'm the one with the blue check mark. I probably have 50 profiles. I can't beat the scammers, and Meta will not take the scammers down for whatever reason. But Facebook, blue check mark. You can find me on Instagram, but adammarburger.com. And I'm pretty active on all social media. That's the best place to find me, Facebook and LinkedIn. So.
Awesome. Well, viewers and listeners also know that if you can't find this information any other place, simply go to the show notes to jamesmiller@lifeology.com, and I'll connect you with Adam Marburger and all of his social media as well. Adam, once again, thank you so much. I really appreciate all your time and energy today.
Yeah, this was a great talk. I appreciate you as well.